My name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm 39 years old, and I learned the hard way that family loyalty only goes so far, especially when my own mother took the stand at my ex-husband's custody hearing and declared me an unfit mother. Your Honor, my daughter has always been unstable. Her words rang out across the crowded courtroom. She can't hold a steady job. She's been in and out of counseling. Honestly, I don't believe she's capable of raising my grandson. I sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a plain navy blazer and crisp white blouse, my brown hair pulled back in the modest style I'd worn for years. The wedding band I had finally taken off 6 months earlier left a pale indentation on my finger that seemed to glow under the courtroom's harsh fluorescent lights. Across the aisle, Marcus, my ex-husband, wore a smug smile while his high-priced attorney nodded along, clearly pleased with my mother's damaging words. This ambush had been orchestrated. They knew her testimony would strike harder than anyone else's. She's never given Tyler a stable life, my mother continued, her voice growing more confident as she leaned into her accusations. She disappears for days at a time. Claims she's working, but I've never seen proof of any real job. My grandson deserves a proper home with his father, a man with a career, who can truly provide for him. 8-year-old Tyler sat in the front row beside my sister, Karen. His big brown eyes were filled with confusion as he watched his grandmother speak against me. Karen refused to meet my gaze, her silence cutting as deeply as our mother's testimony. I thought about the last 2 years since the divorce, the sleepless nights spent worrying over custody battles while also managing some of the toughest cases in the state court system. I thought about the fragile balance I'd maintained between being a dedicated attorney and a devoted mother. She lives in a cramped apartment downtown, my mother pressed on, drives an old car, struggles to pay for Tyler's school supplies. Meanwhile, Marcus has a beautiful suburban home, a steady income, and the means to give him the life any child deserves. Judge Patricia Morrison presided from the bench, her expression unreadable as she listened. I had known her professionally for more than a decade, yet she showed no sign of familiarity, holding the impartial stance her position demanded. My mother's voice rose to its peak as she declared, Rebecca has always been evasive about her supposed career. She insists she holds some important position, yet refuses to disclose what it actually is. For all we know, she could be tangled up in something unlawful, something that could endanger my grandson. The courtroom filled with low murmurs of agreement. On the left side, Marcus's relatives packed the benches, nodding in rhythm with my mother's attempt at character destruction. On my side, only a handful of friends sat scattered, people who had taken time from their jobs to stand beside me, people who genuinely knew what I did for a living. Marcus's attorney, James Crawford, rose to speak. Your Honor, we believe the testimony clearly demonstrates that granting my client full custody would serve the child's best interests. The mother's inability to establish even basic stability, paired with her secretiveness about her line of work, creates serious doubt about her competence as a parent. I remained silent, hands clasped neatly before me, calmly observing the performance play out. 15 years of courtroom experience had taught me the value of patience, waiting for others to expose themselves before making your move. Ms. Hayes, Judge Morrison turned his attention directly to me. How do you answer these claims about your job and your capacity to care for your son? I rose slowly, every movement measured and composed. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness who can speak to those matters. James Crawford frowned in surprise. Your Honor, we were given no notice of any witnesses. The witness only became available this morning. I responded evenly. But I believe his testimony will settle any doubts about my employment. Judge Morrison gave a firm nod. Very well. Please call your witness. I rose, walked toward the courtroom doors, and pulled them open. A tall figure stepped inside, his tailored dark suit flawless, silver hair neatly styled, his very presence commanding immediate respect. Your Honor, I said, my voice carrying across the hushed room, I would like to call Chief Justice William Barrett to the stand. A sharp gasp rippled through the courtroom. I watched my mother's expression shift from confidence to confusion and finally to horror as the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court approached the witness chair. Chief Justice Barrett, I began, my voice steady and professional, the tone I had relied on for over 15 years. Would you please identify me for the court? The Chief Justice met my eyes, his words both formal and warm. You are the Honorable Rebecca Hayes, Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court, where you have served with distinction for the past 8 years. The silence that followed was overwhelming. I heard my mother's sharp breath, saw Marcus's attorney scrambling nervously through his stack of papers. And Chief Justice Barrett, I pressed on, could you explain the scope of my professional duties? Justice Hayes presides over some of our most challenging civil and criminal cases, he replied evenly. She sits on our appellate panel for capital cases, chairs the Judicial Ethics Committee, and has authored several landmark rulings in family law and child welfare. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Tyler staring at me, his eyes wide with realization. At last, he understood why his mother so often worked late, why she disappeared into her study with stacks of case files, why she spoke with such authority about fairness and justice. One last question, Chief Justice, I said. Could you address the claims about my financial stability? He allowed a small, knowing smile. Justice Hayes earns an annual salary of $195,000, along with full benefits. She owns her downtown residence, a penthouse apartment, and maintains a vacation property in the mountains. Her financial disclosure forms, like those of every sitting judge, are part of the public record. I turned toward the courtroom, where my mother sat stunned, her mouth slightly open as the foundation of her carefully rehearsed testimony began to unravel. Your Honor, I said, addressing Judge Morrison, I'd like to explain why my family had no knowledge of my position. Judge Morrison gave a slight nod, curiosity clear on his face. 8 years ago, when I was appointed to the state Supreme Court, I made a conscious decision to separate my professional responsibilities from my personal life. This wasn't out of shame, quite the opposite. I wanted my son to grow up with a normal childhood, free from the constant attention and pressure that come with being the child of a judge. I glanced at Tyler, whose expression was a blend of pride and uncertainty. I chose a modest lifestyle. I drove an ordinary car, shopped at regular stores, and avoided extravagant boutiques. I wanted Tyler to learn the value of humility and hard work, not to feel entitled because of his mother's career. Marcus stared at me as if I were a stranger. Throughout our marriage, he had often dismissed my boring courthouse job, never once showing interest in what I actually did. The reason I was often unavailable for long stretches, I continued, was because I was presiding over difficult cases that sometimes lasted for weeks, even months. The reason I couldn't always be at school events was because I was writing rulings that affected thousands of families across the state. At that moment, Chief Justice Barrett spoke up. If I may, Your Honor, Justice Hayes possesses one of the sharpest legal minds I've encountered in my 30 years on the bench. Her rulings have been consistently upheld by federal courts, and she has earned national recognition for her expertise in family law. I walked back toward the defendant's table, but I no longer felt like a defendant. I was exactly who I had always been, a judge with 15 years of experience, a record of fairness, and a reputation built on integrity. Your Honor, I said firmly, my entire career has been dedicated to protecting children and families. I have authored decisions that removed children from abusive environments, secured fair custody arrangements, and placed the welfare of children above all else. The room was utterly silent. The claim that I'm somehow incapable of caring for my own son isn't just untrue. It's an insult to every family I've defended and every child whose well-being I've safeguarded from this very bench. I glanced at my mother, her face drained of color. What cut the deepest was knowing these accusations came from people who never once asked about my work, never showed the slightest curiosity about my career, and instead chose to assume the worst without seeking the truth. Marcus' attorney was clearly floundering. Your Honor, we weren't aware of. Of what? I cut in sharply. That your client was married to a sitting state Supreme Court justice for 6 years and never once bothered to find out what she actually did for a living. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Crawford, are you saying your client didn't know his wife's profession during their marriage? Marcus finally managed to speak, his words stumbling out. She said she worked at the courthouse. I thought she was just a clerk or something. The ridiculousness of it settled over the room like a suffocating fog. I had been married to a man who believed, for 6 long years that I was nothing more than a courthouse clerk who never questioned the late nights, the complex legal documents I brought home, or the times I traveled for judicial conferences. Your Honor, I said firmly, addressing Judge Morrison, I'd like to enter into record my judicial performance reviews, my financial disclosures, and the custody evaluation prepared by Dr. Sandra Williams, the court-appointed child psychologist. Judge Morrison skimmed the documents quickly. Dr. Williams rated you as an exemplary parent, noting your strong relationship with your child and raising no concerns about your ability to provide care or guidance. I let my eyes sweep the courtroom one last time. My mother unable to meet my gaze, my sister looking weighed down by shame, my ex-husband staring at the floor, and Tyler watching me with a new sense of pride and understanding. Your Honor, I began. My entire career has been devoted to making sure children's well-being is the top priority in custody cases. I've witnessed the damage caused when kids are used as pawns, when families tear each other apart for selfish reasons, and when speculation takes the place of real evidence. My voice grew firmer with each word. I'm petitioning for full physical custody of my son, with the father receiving only supervised visitation until he completes co-parenting classes. I also request that any future custody matters exclude extended relatives who have already shown they're willing to give false statements. Judge Morrison gave a solemn nod. Based on the evidence submitted and the troubling testimony from the defendant's mother, full custody is awarded to Justice Hayes. The father's visitation rights will remain supervised for 6 months, subject to review once he successfully completes the court-mandated parenting program. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Tyler rushed toward me, wrapping his arms tightly around my waist. Mom, why didn't you tell me you're a judge? He whispered. I bent down to meet his eyes. Because I wanted you to love me as your mom, not because of what I do. He broke into a wide grin. That's awesome. Does this mean you get to send people to jail? I smiled. Sometimes. I confessed softly. But what I really do is help families learn how to take care of one another. My mother stepped forward, her earlier boldness replaced with hesitation. Rebecca, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I rose to my feet, slipping an arm protectively around Tyler's shoulders. Mom, you swore in court that I was an unfit parent without knowing anything about my life, my work, or my abilities. You were ready to destroy my bond with my son, all because of assumptions and bias. Her eyes welled up with tears. I thought I was doing the right thing, Marcus murmured. No, I cut in firmly. Marcus said what he had to in order to win custody, and you chose to believe him over your own daughter. By now, the courtroom was nearly deserted, just family members and a handful of onlookers still seated. For 15 years, you've asked what I do for a living, and I always gave vague answers because I value my privacy. But you never pushed further, never showed genuine curiosity. You just assumed that because I didn't boast about my success, there wasn't any. My gaze shifted to my sister Karen, quietly crying in the front row. I became a judge at 31, one of the youngest in the state's history. My rulings are studied in law schools. I've fought to protect thousands of children and families. My entire life has been dedicated to fairness and justice. Chief Justice Barrett, who had been waiting quietly in the gallery, stepped forward. Rebecca, I hope this ordeal doesn't make you lose faith in the incredible work you've been doing, she said gently. Thank you, Chief Justice, I answered. If anything, this has only reminded me why what we do matters so much. As Tyler and I left the courthouse, his small hand wrapped in mine, I understood that this painful chapter had carried an unexpected lesson. I had poured so much energy into shielding my son from the possible consequences of my position that I had hidden my true self from those who deserved to know me best. But more importantly, I realized that respect built on assumption holds no weight, while respect earned through integrity is unshakable. 6 months later, Marcus finished his parenting classes and was granted unsupervised visits. He never remarried, and he never again doubted my ability to care for our son. My mother wrote me a letter of apology, but I chose not to reply. Some betrayals cut too deep, exposing too much of someone's character to simply be forgiven or forgotten. Today, Tyler proudly tells his friends that his mom is a judge. He's come to understand the meaning of justice, fairness, and the courage to stand up for what's right. He's also learned that even the people who love you most can sometimes inflict the deepest wounds, but that doesn't diminish your value. As for me, I discovered that dimming your own light doesn't keep you safe. It only makes it easier for others to overlook you. I stopped concealing who I was, began embracing my accomplishments, and showed my son that integrity and perseverance are things worth celebrating. The woman who walked into that courtroom feeling attacked and alone was the same woman who walked out vindicated and strong. The difference wasn't in what I had achieved. It was in finally allowing others to see who I truly was all along. Justice, I realized, isn't only something you uphold for others. Sometimes, it's something you must claim for yourself.